sharing on the screen. All right, let's see. All right, so we are live right now. Give me a moment to make sure everything is locked in on the channel.
We're doing more than breaking the fourth wall.
Okay, let me just go and toggle. So everybody, we are currently live on YouTube and on our channel. Thank you all very much for joining us. This is our first hybrid meeting back to normal in Town Hall. When we share our maps and presentations, the planning board has already been debriefed about how to use them, and you will see them on Zoom and at home as well as in the room. Again, thank you all very much, and good to be back.
It's good to be back. Live and in person, welcome to the Planning Board Town of East Hampton meeting of March 23rd, 2022. We are live and in person. We do have two members who are going to be joining us over the magic of the internet, and we also have planning staff, which will be also virtually with us. We have 4 matters on for site plan review. We also have 2 matters on for public hearing. Consistent with the notice that went out when the public hearings were noticed, in order to be heard at the public hearing, you need to be here in person. We're not doing call-in on the public hearings. And again, that's consistent with the notice that we previously given. The public hearings are scheduled, there's 2 of them. They're scheduled for 7 o'clock. We have 2 matters on for site plan review that it's my hope, or my expectation anyway, that they can be taken care of in the time before the public hearings. And once those 2 matters are heard, then we'll do the public hearings, and then after the public hearings, we will recommence our site plan reviews. So if you have a scorecard at home, we're going to be doing Megron Realty and Inlet Seafood first, then we'll have the public hearing, and then we'll go to Ocean Beach, Resort Renovation, and Maidstone Acres. We also have a couple of resolutions on in our regular meeting, and if it by some chance happens that we're able to finish off Megron Realty and Inlet Seafood before 7 o'clock, we'll quickly go to those two regular meeting resolutions. So with that, we'll begin with Megron Realty. The matter is the representative of Megron here? I apologize if you're looking right at me and I'm not recognizing that you are from Megron, but because you've been doing this by TV for the last 2 years. All right. Do we have?
It's Lori, and she's not planning on being there.
All right. We have a word from her that said that?
Yes.
Okay, very well. In that case, Marco Wu from the Planning Department will be presenting, and Ian Colapimont will be covering the matter for the planning board. So Marco, go right ahead.
Good evening. Yeah, so the only thing that this application needed was to submit lighting information since the lighting fixtures were changed for the proposal. This was a modification to a previous approval. The applicant did state in their new submitted items that the fixtures will be fully shielded. We do have images of those, and that it won't exceed 13 watts and would meet the town's maximum color temperature of 3,000 Kelvin. So all the information is in hand, it's been reviewed, and it is complete and ready for approval.
Okay. Well, the applicant's not here, so Ian will go directly to you.
Yeah, I think that all we were waiting on was a lighting plan here, and they've submitted it, so I think this is ready for approval.
Okay. Does anybody on the planning board have anything they wish to add on this? Okay, so can we agree that it is complete and ready for approval? Yeah. Okay. In that case, while we're on the subject, I'm calling it audible on my audible. Ian, do you have the resolution amending approval? on this?
I believe that I do. Let me, yeah, in the matter of Megron Realty site plan special permit for resolution recommending approval, I have read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 6-0. Okay, next we have Inlet Seafood. This is Will. You've got the planning department. Lou, you've got the planning board, and is the applicant. Oh, and I should note we have a change in counsel because of a recusal matter. Our attorney on most matters, Nancy Marshall, is accused. David McMaster from the town attorney's office will be covering it. Is the applicant with us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, here for the applicant.
Okay, your name?
John Huber, Huber.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay, in that case, Will, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, as you can see on the screen, hopefully.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. The application is to add an 1,803 square foot vinyl awning to the exterior of an existing two-story building containing the Inlet Seafood restaurant. The awning will be supported by 2-inch square tubing frame steel. To secure the awning, there will either be concrete footings or buried steel holders to which the poles will be soldered or welded. The fabric of the awning will be removed in the off-season. This addition would allow for additional space for outdoor dining seating. Site plan application was approved previously in 2018 to change the existing retail space into a 27-seat bar on the first floor of the building. There was also a proposal for a new ice house storage office building for an existing marina use and the conversion of a building now used for a storage into a residence for the marina manager. This approval was consisted of 2 different phases. A survey was originally submitted to the Architectural Review Board, but not the Planning Board. A revised survey, which is the one you see here, was submitted to the Planning Board on November 5th, 2021. That gives a clearer idea of what the exact intentions are for the application, including indication of how it will impact the property's distance to the wetlands and setbacks, and how the proposal will address the maximum allowable clearing on site. The property is situated in the Harbor Protection Overlay District, which has a maximum allowable clearing of 50%. On the most recent site plan, a revegetation plan was required by the planning board in order to rectify the site status as overcleared. However, with the new outdoor seating proposed by the awning, the site is once again in violation of that maximum allowable clearing. A variance would be required for the project to move forward, and a variance from the clearing restrictions in the Harbor Protection Overlay District would trigger a change for the project to a secret Type 1 action review. The planning department recommends that the applicant be required to revegetate the property to meet the clearing requirements in order for the application to move forward. However, it does not appear that there would be any viable areas for outdoor seating remaining if the property was revegetated into conformance with the town code. The board and the applicant should discuss potential alternatives. Given that additional clearing was done to make way for the outdoor seating area, this would mean that the proposed application is in violation of the previously established outdoor seating pilot program. Nevertheless, in the wake of COVID-19, it is in the interest of the town to encourage outdoor seating whenever possible. And thusly, the planning department leaves it up to the planning boards to decide whether this will be an issue moving forward with the application. The dimensions of the awning would remove, as you can see on the survey, would remove 30 feet between the existing structure and its distance to the nearest wetlands. Thusly, due to it now being within 150 feet of the dune crest, a natural resources special permit would most likely be required for the site plan to be approved. An application for said natural resources special permit has been submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals as of November 5th, 2021. In conclusion, in order for the application to be deemed complete, a natural resources special permit will be required, and the planning department recommends that the applicant be required to revegetate the property to compensate for the excessive clearing in the awning seating area.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. John Huber of Dayton, Voorhees, and Balsam here in East Hampton for the applicant. Thank you to you and council and Will for the time you've devoted to the application. Will's January 26, 2021 memo identifies two key issues that are identified on the last page. It's the revegetation and the natural resource special permit review. I'd like to take those out of order and talk about the NRSP first. That is working its way through the process and will be completed in due course. And I imagine that aside from these proceedings, I will be communicating with Will and possibly members of the zoning board as to the outcome of that application. As for the revegetation issue, the October 25, 2021 Warbridge survey that was submitted in support of the application indicates the existing and allowed clearing for the property, with emphasis on the fact that it's in the Harbor Protection Overlay District. But one of the important details that has gotten blurred in the extensive history of this property is that all of that clearing that's there was pre-existing non-conforming. I've conferred with the applicants, various gentlemen that operate at the site, and they have told me that they have done no clearing in the past 30 years, and it was in the condition that it was in. It's currently in condition, that clearing, as it's been for that long, nearly 3 decades. So what I'd like to do is I would really want to approach this from a solutions-oriented approach and see if maybe we could have a site meeting with representatives from the planning board, the planning department, the applicant, and their landscape designer, and me, walk the site and take a look at what some of the high priority revegetation areas are and see what opportunities exist, and then talk about whether by way of amending that 2018 site plan approval, because much of the work that was proposed under that 2018 plan has not been done. So maybe we could all look at it with a fresh set of eyes and under the current situation and see if we can come up with a revegetation plan that is collectively created with insight from all the stakeholders, and it's actionable. And then we could come back with a landscaping plan that makes sense under the circumstances. And aside from that, the awning that's proposed is 60.1 times 30, 1,803 square feet. No clearing was done in this area where we would propose it, as indicated up there. And we're not adding any additional seating. This is basically to give the restaurant operation the flexibility. If there are a lot of patrons in there waiting to be seated, they could step out under the awning. I was at the site yesterday. There's either 8 or 9 picnic tables out there now. The thought was maybe put some lawn chairs in there, and it's really that simple.
So when it says in the report on page 6, given that additional clearing is done to make way to the outdoor seating area, that's incorrect?
I believe, and not intentionally incorrect.
No,
I think it's just this, if you look at the property card for this, I don't know if the board gets that as part of your due diligence, but there's the property card is maybe 7 pages, and it's an extensive history of applications and natural resource permitting and wetlands flagging and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just one of the details that it's somehow got in there that there was additional clearing done, and this is a very lawful operation. So I really would like to approach it from a solutions-oriented perspective and see if we can get this thing cleaned up, mm-hmm. and then move on, because it's a great place out there, and a lot of the local people enjoy it. It's got an excellent reputation for the food and everything else that goes along with it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ian?
No, that's me.
Oh, was it you? I was looking at the first one. My apologies.
Yeah, I find myself here between a rock and a hard place, because in order to have this area have an awning, the clearing it's going to necessitate the over clearing to remain in place. And to me, that's a problem. But I am sympathetic to the restaurant. I've gone to the restaurant a lot of times myself. It's in the town that I live in. I know a lot of people that love it. It's got a great view. The owner, I know one of the owners. It's a really nice place, and I'm sure they don't want to do anything that's underhanded or nefarious. So that's why I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I do want to accommodate the applicant. And I'm also very sympathetic to what restaurants have gone through because of COVID. And having this outdoor seating certainly will help. Whether COVID is in place or not, it certainly will benefit the customers, the people who will use the restaurant. It'll be nice to sit outdoors, especially where it's located. So in that regard, it's a benefit to everyone, the applicant as well as the patrons. But again, I can't get over the stumbling block of overlooking the over clearing. That's something that I just can't let go and override. I understand it's a pre-existing situation, but nevertheless, we're being asked to approve this new use or this new way of seating patrons. And I think that the overclearing needs to be addressed, and we need to take care of that. I just don't see how we can, because if you revegetate, then you don't have the space for the outdoor seating. So I certainly would be agreeable to for the planning department and the applicant to try to get together and find a solution if there is one. I agree with the applicant's representative of what he said, that we should try to do that. So I guess that's where we can leave it for today, because I don't think we have a solution as of right now.
Just so that Sharon and Ian know, I'm going to go around the physical table first and then come to you guys. So, Randy, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I share Lou's. It sounds to me like, from what I've read in the memo, and I guess this is Marco's memo, or it's just Will. This is Will. I don't know if Will can hear me.
You can.
I can hear you, man.
Okay. So apparently the 2018 approval and the proposed revegetation in that approval would have brought them into conformance with the clearing restrictions?
Yes.
That's right? So,
yes, at the time, that approval would have brought them into conformance with clearing, yes.
So if Mr. Huber can find, it seems to me that the area underneath the awning is at 1,803 square feet. If you can find somewhere else on the site to basically move the revegetation from the 2018 plan to a new spot, then I don't really have a problem. I'm wondering what, we've had some other applications like this in Montauk where the idea is while you're waiting to sit down to eat, you'll sit outside and maybe have a drink. Is that sort of what we're talking about?
May I step up? Yeah, that's the very simple essence of the idea, is to get a lot of that crowd out under the awning and enjoying the view and whatnot.
would you serve food? You're not gonna, you said no additional seating, but conceivably you could have people filling the outdoor area for quite a while, waiting to get into the restaurant.
Mhm. Correct.
So in terms of, the other thing we're always interested in is the wastewater flow. I understand, well, this is a pre-existing non-conforming as far as wastewater flow as well. And so I think we have to look at is what you're proposing going to increase the wastewater flow on the site, which is probably already not conforming.
May I answer that? I believe that this proposal will not affect because they're not adding additional seating in addition to what already exists. They're not exceeding the capacity. I think the restaurant capacity, the total capacity is 100 people. So we're not adding additional seating to exceed the 100 people. Right. If I may, while I'm up too, maybe Will could put up the October 27, 2017 site plan that was part of that 2018 approval. And
Yeah, hang on, I got it here somewhere.
The reason I bring this up is it shows the proposed areas of re-veg at that time. And you're spot on when you talk about maybe finding another 1,803 square feet elsewhere on the property as an offset from this area, which dovetails perfectly with my suggestion that I get out there with the planning department, maybe someone from natural resources if they have any skin in the game. And we all talk about it and realistically look at this. The applicant has indicated for me there are spots on the property that they very much want to revegetate. And consistent with the town's revegetation policy, we want to use native species, different, ground cover, shrubs, grasses, different things. So we might be able to achieve it in a way that's very, very effective. If I may, I'll step over to the screen. This is, so north is up, okay, this is to the west, and the south of the restaurant building. Here is the proposed awning area, and as we can see,
John?
Yeah, don't touch the screen. Right?
This is Eric Chance. I just wanted to let you know, LTV had let us know, if you look on the bottom of that board, there's a stylus, a pen, and if you want, you can draw on that screen and circle things and highlight them, if that helps your presentation. I just wanted to let you know that's available to you.
It would also help all of us at home because we would see everything. Thank you so much.
Yes, so, let's give it a shot.
I think you want to use your pen.
Yeah.
Pretty please, no. Thank you.
So if I may, and Mr. Parsons, I apologize for hijacking your commentary. Not my intention.
No, you're beats the boss.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know when you go too far.
Okay.
Do
Yes, sir. So here is the, not even sure that's actually, but at any rate, I don't think I need to go through that formalities.
Lou has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I thought the clearing issue was not the 1,800 square feet or, however many. It's a much bigger issue than that. The clearing issue is, the clearing numbers are 147, almost 148,000 square feet of clearance, which is surpassing the maximum of 109,000.
38,611 square feet.
Very good. So that's the problem.
I understand.
The problem is they didn't implement the 2018 plan, which would have brought them much closer would have brought them into conformity. They didn't do that. That's another.
So they have to deal with that.
They have to do that now.
So there's a lot of.
What they want to do is they want to, I guess, revisit the whole situation going back to 2018. I don't know whether you're going to succeed at that.
I understand.
Because it's a big ask. But did you have anything else that you wanted to raise?
Well, I guess the septic. I don't Do I see an alternative septic system proposed? I don't see it in Will's memo.
Not as part of this application. And again, if the board sees daylight at the end of all this with a proposal to install a low nitrogen system, I'm certain that the applicant would listen to this and consider it. And as far as overall viability of a solution, anything that we can try to make this work is game for discussion.
It sounds like you're gonna have more to deal with the planning department before you get back here. All right, we're gonna go into
Yeah,
Michael.
I would say that would certainly be an attractive addition to the
I
application.
wouldn't, we ordinarily are receptive to proposals that involve that, but I wouldn't want you to take that as any kind of quid pro quo or any kind of commitment on this board's part.
Understood.
But, you know, we historically, like,
Mr. Hoover, you're aware that there's a lot of grant money for those systems?
I am. County is the administrator when I last checked. And
And there's also a town program.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I share the sentiments of Lou and the conflict. I support outdoor seating and all that's been said, but you said though that for 30 years it has been like this?
Yes, sir.
I mean,
According, I don't have personal knowledge of that, but the doc.
you can get weeds to stop growing it over 30 years. You're a magician because, I mean, how over 30 years has nothing grown in that space?
It's mowed. They mow it.
So, okay.
well, that'll keep it clear.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Sharon, you have anything?
No, not really. I mean, I think if the planning department is willing to do as the applicant is asking, go out there and see if they can work out the clearing. I mean, I think that is pretty much the biggest issue they have in front of them is coming into compliance or at least close to compliance on the clearing. And then obviously they already have the NSRP in front of the zoning board and waiting for a hearing. And if they're, willing to do the septic as part of that NRSP, it would be a great addition to the project. But yeah, they have some work to do.
And Ian, you want to?
Yeah, I agree with the previous board members. Generally supportive of the project in theory. I think it's mainly a clearing issue, and we have a relatively recent application with a mutual understanding of what the revegetation plan was. If that was an error, those numbers are wrong, I would listen to that, but that's what we have to go on right now. So if there's a way to offset this outdoor dining plan with revegetation so that the numbers work out to match that 2018 approval, I would be all for it, and I encourage the applicant to work with the department to find a solution. Because again, I think the project on its face is fine. It's not, but this is a sensitive area. I agree that the septic would be a benefit if the applicant's open to it, and not over clearing an area in HPOT is important. So that's all I have for now, but I hope that everybody can work towards a solution.
I'll make it unanimous. You're gonna have to deal with the clearing issue.
Okay.
I mean, it's too physically large an issue. 32,000 square feet. It's like 3/4 of an acre. So I don't think we need to go through the issues. We pretty much covered that. And you also have your issues with the NRSP, with the zoning board. So
Yes.
right.
Thank you.
Very much. Okay. Let me just see here. 6:59. Look at that. Thank you, Mr. McMaster. Okay. They say in showbiz we're gonna fill for about 30 seconds. 7? You got 7? 7. Magic answer box says 7. Okay. We have 2 public hearings. I'm gonna read in the one for Ed, which is 85 Rye Highway. And then Ian, you're gonna read in lot 772. Okay, I'm gonna do the 5-rod first. Take notice that a public hearing will be held before the East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022, at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, to consider the application of 8 5-rod highway agricultural barn site plan approval pursuant to Article 6 of Chapter 255 of the East Hampton Town Code to construct a 1,634 square foot agricultural barn with a sanitary system and to legalize an existing 292 square foot chicken coop and existing agricultural fencing. The property is a 261,786 square foot agricultural easement and is located on the south side of 8 5-rod highway, Wayne-Scott, and is situated in an A5 residence/agricultural overlay district, zoning district, as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton and identified on the Suffolk County tax map as parcel 300-200-2-48.4. Subject application is classified as a type 2 action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, Part 617 of the New York Code of Rules and Regulations, and Chapter 128 of the Town Code. A survey prepared by Saska Surveying Company, PC, dated revised December 2nd, 2021. A set of plans prepared by Malik Taylor, including project information, A01, A0.1, dated revised September 24th, 2021. Foundation plan A-1.0, first floor plan A-1.1, second floor plan A-1.2, north elevation A-2.0, east elevation A-2.1, south elevation A-2.2, west elevation A-2.3, east-west sections A-3.0, north-south section A-3.1, and wall sections A-50, and a set of plans prepared by S.L. Maresca Associates, dated revised December 1, 2021, including sanitary site plan S1 and sanitary site plan enlargement S2, are available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York. The hearing will remain open for a period of 7 days until March 30th, 2022, for the purpose of receiving written comments. Written comments may be submitted by mail directed to planningboard@ehamptonny.gov and by mail to 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York 11937, and received on or before the close of business on March 30th, 2022. Please check the town's website at http://ehamptonny.gov for updated information regarding hearing procedures. Please take notice that due to public health and safety concerns relating to COVID-19, the planning board is not expected to meet in person at the time of this hearing pursuant to New York Law Chapter 417 of the laws of 2021 Part E, which authorizes, notwithstanding the provisions of Article 7 of the Officers Law, to the contrary, political subdivisions to permit any public body to hold meetings remotely without in-person access by conference call or similar device service, provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceedings and that such meetings are recorded and later transcribed. This public hearing of the public board may be held by a video teleconferencing with the transcript provided at a later date pursuant to such authority. Public can watch and participate in the public hearing live on local TV, channel 22, and live online from the public meetings link on the LTV website. Members of the public may provide comments on the matter by being heard by calling the number available on live stream 351-888-6331. Transcript of the public hearing. Pardon me. Transcript of the public hearing will be held by video conferencing, prepared and filed with the town clerk and placed on the town's website. Please check the meeting agenda posted on the town's website for any changes to the instructions to access the public hearing and for updated information. Did we post on the public hearing on that regarding the live meeting?
Yeah, it's obviously a very wordy notice, but it covers all the alternatives. When this had to be sent to the Star, at that point, it looked like it wouldn't be in person, which is why, but again, it gives both alternatives, which you're doing actually tonight, And the calling in is only, if we were just going all Zoom. That's why that's phrased out.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Do we have jurisdiction over this matter?
I guess we do, Chair. I reviewed the affidavit of service posting as well as the postal receipt, and it does appear that the property was properly noticed.
Very well. Do we hear from the planning department first on this? Eric? Is Eric there?
We're waiting. It's all good.
Ordinarily,
He's here.
Usually just what the map from the planner, just describing the proposed, features on that map, because the project description is already ready for the record for the notice. But Marco, if you have the site plan, if you could please put that up. So this is the site plan for the application. Everything you see to the right-hand side of the screen, the eastern side of the property near Wayne Scott Pond, is basically already built. That's the single, a number of residences there, 2 of them. The structures which are the subject of the site plan application is the barn and accessory parking area and some fenced-in areas that Marco is zooming in on right now, which is in the southwestern corner of the property, close to Town Line Road, near the access into the site.
very well. Thank you very much. Okay, are there any members of the public who wish to be heard with respect to this application? Okay, in that case, please note that the hearing will remain open until March 30th, 2022 for the purpose of receiving written comments. Do we need to make a motion to close the spoken portion of the public hearing, or will the meeting notice suffice?
I think the meeting notice.
Very well. Okay. All right. In that case, we will now move on to the next. I'm sorry. Actually, is the applicant here? Does the applicant wish to be heard on this?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Now, moving on to the next public hearing. That's 72. Lot 72, pardon me, LLC minor subdivisions. And Ian?
Yep. Take notice that a public hearing will be held before the East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022, at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter, this matter may be heard. To consider the application of Lot 72 LLC minor subdivision approval pursuant to Chapter 220 subdivision of land of the East Hampton Town Code to divide a 44,934 square foot 1.0315 acre parcel into 2 lots. Proposed Lot 1 will contain 21,201 square feet. Proposed Lot 2 will contain 23,733 square feet. The property is located on the north side of Oyster Shores Road, East Hampton, and are situated in a B residence zoning district as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton and are identified on the Suffolk County tax map as parcels number 300-118-1-44. Subject application is classified as an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA, Part 617 of the New York Code, Rules and Regulations, and Chapter 128, Environmental Quality Review of the Town Code. A survey prepared by Saska Surveying Company, dated revised January 27th, 2022, is available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, in New York. The hearing will remain open for a period of 7 days until March 30th, 2022, for purposes of receiving written comments. Written comments may be submitted by email directed to Planning Board at easthamptonny.gov, and by mail to 300 Panago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York, 11937, and received on or before close of business March 30th, 2022. Please check the town's website at https://easthamptonny.gov/ for updated information regarding hearing procedures. Please note that due to public health and safety concerns related to COVID-19, the Planning Board is not expected to meet in person at the time of this hearing, pursuant to New York law, Chapter 417 of the laws of 2021, Part E, which authorizes, notwithstanding the provisions of Article 7 of the Officers' Law and contrary political subdivisions, to permit any public body to hold meetings remotely without in-public in-person access by conference call or similar services, provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceedings. And that such meetings are recorded and later transcribed. This public hearing of the planning board can be held via video conferencing with a transcript provided at a later date pursuant to such authority. The public can watch and participate in the public hearing live on local TV, channel 22, and live online from the public meetings link on the LTV website, https://www.ltv.org. Members of the public may provide comments on the matter being heard by calling the number available on the live stream, which is 351-888-6331. A transcript of the public hearing held by video conferencing will be prepared and filed with the town clerk and placed upon the town's website. Please check the meeting agenda posted on the town's website, www.ehamptony.gov, for any changes to the instructions to access the public hearing and for updated information. Dated March 2nd, 2022, Samuel Kramer, Chairman.
Thank you, Ian. And do we have jurisdiction over this application?
Yes, we do, Chair. I reviewed the affidavit of service and posting as well as the certified postal receipts, and it does appear that it was properly noticed.
Very good. And this notice again had provided for alternative methods for holding the hearing, and we are holding it live. Eric, or whoever in the planning department is covering this one, can we get a little background?
I can do that, Sam. Yeah, this is an application to divide the original parcel into two individual lots. The original parcel will be divided into lot 1 and lot 2. This property was previously subdivided. I think it was like back in the, it was, the property was previously subdivided, and then because of a pool that was on site that has now been removed, the applicant is looking to re-subdivide it back into its original 2 lots, more or less. This application was reviewed by the planning board. And all previous matters were resolved at the previous planning board meeting, so the application should be ready for approval now.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much. Do any members of the public, present wish to speak with respect to this application? Planning board might want to note that we received a couple of written comments. I know that because I got the emails and I passed them along. So, all right. And again, no one is here in the public, but I'll remind all that the record will remain open for 7 days until March 30th, 2022, for the purpose of receiving written comments. With that, we will go on now to the 2 remaining matters on for site plan review. The first one is Ocean Beach Resort Renovation. Marco is covering that. Randy, you've got that for the planning board. And Ms. Bistrien, are you here on that one?
I am.
Okay, thanks very much. You ready for us? Okay, Marco, go right ahead.
The board should see an aerial at the moment. This is an aerial of Oceanside Beach Resort. So this application was last reviewed by the planning board a little over 2 years ago. This was submitted to modify an existing 34-unit motel by converting an existing 3-unit motel building, which I'm going over right here with my mouse, into a 2-unit motel building, a lobby area, a manager's area, and a roughly 1,400 and sorry, that should be correct. It should be a 1,000 square foot basement kitchen, which is going to be brand new. Also proposes a 463 square foot first floor deck addition and a 515 square foot new second floor deck, and the replacement of the existing wood decking around the existing swimming pool. The project also includes the replacement of existing sanitary systems for a new low nitrogen sanitary system. So this is located in around near downtown Montauk and is one of the westernmost parcels in the area. It is zoned resort and is 100% cleared of natural vegetation. It is surrounded by protected open space as well as the Second House Museum. Pursuant to SECRA, the project is a Type 2 action. So moving to the sanitary plan, which the applicant has submitted. So the applicant has submitted a cover letter which states that that they no longer intend to provide dining areas associated with the proposed accessory restaurant, and that there will be no food service to the public and no additional employees. So that first floor was to have the restaurant with seating in place of the units, in addition to the basement kitchen. The seating in the bar area has been eliminated on the first floor, and the kitchen remains. But the kitchen remains. So the letter also states that due to the removing of the seating for that restaurant area, the applicant would not be required to provide the additional parking spaces required by special permit standards in the town code. However, it's the planning department's reading of this section of the town code that even if no additional seating for the accessory use is proposed, the additional parking is still required for the principal use, which is the motel. So reading the code section, parts of it, the parking requirements for a resort or transient motel with an accessory restaurant shall be calculated by adding the parking requirements for the principal use based upon existing code requirements at the time, plus 50% of the parking required for the accessory use if that use were a primary use at the property. The planning board shall have the authority to reduce the required parking upon finding that the site, after the addition of the accessory use, will provide sufficient parking, not results in additional traffic congestion or a significant increase in the risk of vehicular or pedestrian accidents, and promotes sound community planning. So the motel use itself, by the town code, would require a minimum of 42 spaces, which is broken down in the memo. The accessory restaurant parking requirements would be 50% of 1 per 3 permanent seats or 1 per 3 persons of rated capacity, plus 1 employee per shift. Although the applicants have stated that there are no seating areas proposed, it is noted that the 515 square foot second floor deck, which is in this area right here, my mouse is hovering over, proposed could hold roughly 33 seats under the fire code, which would be an additional parking requirement of 6 spaces. The subject parcel is currently substandard in terms of the quantity of parking, with at most 11 non-delineated spaces in the front. There currently exists multiple parking spaces in the state and town right-of-ways. However, these do not represent on-site parking, which would meet the aforementioned requirement. So parking is noted to be there is known to be parking along South Eaton Street, which you can see in the aerial that you could have seen in the aerial earlier before, and I can bring that up if the board requests it. So the planning board has the authority to waive the parking requirement for the accessory restaurant. However, at the time of the last review, the board elected not grant such an exemption. This did include an interior dining area with 16 seats, as opposed to the applicant's current proposal of no dining areas or seating. The planning department notes that although the indoor seating may have been removed, there are still ample areas in which temporary tables and chairs could be established outdoors, such as the open lawn, the existing decks, and the proposed second floor deck, especially during the summer seasons. The planning board should discuss if they find the removal of the indoor dining areas and seating sufficient to warrant a reduction of the on-site parking requirement. So in conclusion, those are the major changes that they have eliminated the indoor restaurant area compared to last board's review. And the board should review the code section and the standards for accessory restaurants to a motel and discuss if the revised plan meets those standards.
Thank you, Mark. We'll start our report. Mr. Stream.
Good evening, Chairman Kramer, members of the board. First, I have to say this is very strange to be in here. It's like 2 years. I'm Britton Bistreen, representing Oceanside Owners LLC and the property at 626 Montauk Highway. If we could put up the septic plan, I think that would be like where I'd like to start. We've been in this planning board process for quite a while, since 2017. Our main intent during those past 5 years has been unchanged. We want to provide food service for our hotel guests so that we can receive a hotel rating commensurate with our operation. A hotel can't receive a 4-star rating without food service. We have a tough time attracting employees and competing in the marketplace with a 3-star hotel. Similar places like Gurney's and Maram, you can offer more amenities, and also, you know, it's a resort, so people have that word resort and they think food service. I don't want to go too deep into the history of how many times we've pivoted here. It's lengthy. It's not entirely relevant, except for to say that we've redesigned it extensively 3 times. The current proposal at hand, which I think is really what is key for the board to hone in on, is for room service catering kitchen within the footprint of the existing basement of one building on the property. The building has 3 rooms. There's some nuances in the memo that aren't entirely correct. The manager's room is actually a unit. So there are 3 units. We're keeping 3 units. There is no changes on the first floor. There's no addition of decks. I think that's a holdover from a previous application. The only thing we're changing on the first floor is putting a stairway on the plans, stairway down to the basement. We're also not there's a note in there about redecking the pool. That's not part of the proposal either. We are proposing a 2nd floor deck, not necessarily related to food service. We're in site plan, so this was more of a comprehensive. What have our guests said in the 5 years that we've operated in this property? What have they said? And one of the major feedbacks is, this is a hotel on the ocean. Where's the ocean? 1 room on this property sees the ocean. So that deck is not necessarily meant to affiliate with the restaurant. It's to provide a place where the people who are staying at the hotel can see the ocean, whether they read a book, whether they go up there for sunset. So it's not somewhere where we're going to have chairs and tables and rated occupancy. I think the key here is use. And we keep throwing around this word restaurant. And I just want to read from the town code. The definition of restaurant is a use in a building having its sole purpose of the preparation and serving of food for consumption on premise within furnished dining areas. We're not serving food on premise within furnished dining areas. We are serving room service to our guests who have an app, and they will order food from the app, and it will be delivered to their room. I don't think this is a definition of a restaurant. I think this intention is part of our motel use. And is this really an accessory use that needs additional parking when the same employees that are already on site are, you know, it's a 1,000 square foot kitchen. We have 1 or 2 people doing room service for our 34 rooms, and no service to the public. We have no point of sale. I can't walk in off the street and go to a counter and order something. I have to be a hotel guest. So I think it's important to sort of weigh that in our discussions, whether this is a separate use. The parking issue is something we've revealed a lot here, but I just would like the takeaway, we've never had a parking problem. We've never had a noise violation. This will be operating our 6th summer. Whether we recognize the highway parking or not, the fact of the matter is I'm not adding any employees, I'm not adding any hotel rooms, all I'm adding is a 1,000 square foot kitchen. And I think it was also missed, if you see here, we did propose to add 3 parking spaces at the southeast corner. I think that was also overlooked. The one last major point I want to make is that we have committed to replacing full replacement of all the conventional septic systems on this property with 2 on-site wastewater treatment systems. We are not impacting building 2 or building 3, the majority of our floor area and our patrons and our usage and our motel rooms. We're not even touching them. And yet we've offered to upgrade this entire site to 2 very massive, hundreds of $1,000 low nitrogen septic systems. All in all, we've been through this a lot. This is the bare minimum to meet the owner's business needs. I don't think it has an impact, especially if you take the public component out of this, that the public can't walk in there. You know, they'd have to have a guest room. They'd have to have a bracelet to be at the pool. That is the regulation. I believe the board at this last review was, well, how do we regulate this? Well, we're not a restaurant. We're not open to the public. There's nowhere I can't tap out somebody and say, I want a hamburger. I also want to point out that it's a conforming use in a resort zoning district, and it meets all the zoning requirements. I know we'd really like to see this project move forward. It's been a very long time, and a lot of resources were extended to get to this point. I think I would like to just open up to board discussion.
Very well, thank you. Randy?
Brittany, let me clarify so what's in the memo? You said there are several things that need to be correct.
And it's a new planner, and there's, yeah.
That's fine.
And it's been a long period of time. So the proposal is 1,000 square foot basement that already exists. It's not being constructed. It's finishing a basement that exists. And I don't have off the top of my head, 500 and help me, 15 square foot second floor deck.
Well, I wrote down, you said only one of the decks is going to be the second floor deck?
That's all that's proposed. Finishing the basement and the second floor deck.
So there.
And 2 septic systems.
No, what was there, first?
There was a first floor deck that was in the previous proposal.
And pool deck.
And that was previous proposal.
Okay.
Is that part of this proposal?
No.
So there's no pool?
The pool exists.
Oh, okay, but the decking, I'm saying.
It was to replace the existing decking, and that's not part of the scope. So finish the basement, second floor deck, 3 parking spaces, 2 septic systems.
Stairway down to the basement, right?
A stairway down to the basement on the first floor.
So I have to say, I agree with you about the definitions. I took a look at that today. Once that's what the definition says, food consumption on the premises within furnished dining areas. So to me, this is sounding more like an accessory use to a resort, but it's not a restaurant. So I would say it seems more like just an accessory room service kitchen to a resort. So I agree with you there. I think the only thing I think you've come a long way. I
only took 5 years.
And the redesign is good, the septic's good. The thing that came up last time we looked at this though is that this property can be used for special events. And in fact, I think it's part of the business plan to have weddings, wedding receptions, etc. So when that happens, kind of everything gets thrown out the window.
But that's under a separate permit from a separate board. You have to have a mass gathering permit for a wedding.
Yeah.
And that's reviewed with music and food and the fire marshal and the tents and all of that is reviewed. And then whoever that board always seems to be changing. I can't remember what their title is. Special Events Committee. But they review each one of those events holistically, and then they review how many of those you have in the summer. So that's not necessarily part of this proposal.
Do you know how many, like we had COVID for 2 years, but
people weren't having large parties and tents.
Do you have an idea typically how many special events they would like to do?
I don't represent them on those. I know that the special events they have all gone through that committee, and I know that there's never been any code enforcement violation tickets issued as a result of them. But other than the quantity, I don't know.
Okay, so it's possible if there's a wedding or wedding reception here and food is prepared that people are going to use during the special permit, they're going to use the decks and they're going to use the pool. But you know what? I'm really, we'll hear what the rest of the board thinks, but I'm really pretty much okay with this now. So.
I agree. This, first of all, one of the issues that we always had with this hotel was the parking, the insufficient parking. And I think part of that, or the reason for that, was based on the use that you were proposing. And we envisioned outside people coming in, having drinks, having a party, that kind of thing. Non-resident people coming in, filling up the whole backyard, taking up parking spaces, and it would just create bedlam. I think the plan that you're submitting now severely curtails that, in my opinion. I think the hotel has been operating this way for the 5 years that you've been in front of us, and before that, with the existing parking. So I don't think, it's not ideal. If you were building this motel today and coming in front of us, you wouldn't get approved. But given the situation, I think what you're requesting is fair. And what I think is really huge, is that you're installing a new IA system. Because I'm familiar it's a system to cover the entire hotel. Not familiar with the 3 that are there now. I know one of them is a failing system. It's got if it has any clearance to groundwater, I'd be surprised. So I think it's enough. I think with what you're proposing, I agree with Randy. There's really I don't have a problem. I like the idea of the new septic system. I don't think this is going to create the bedroom that everybody was fearing, the early surf lodge type of story. So I'm okay with this.
Michael?
Chair, is it this body that determines if this is a restaurant or not a restaurant?
We determine, when as council, what is our role with respect to interpreting the language of that code?
Well, it's ultimately Ann Glennon's. I know the planning department from their memo has their view of the definition. Britain just gave it hers. I can't say which one is right or wrong. You can come up with what you consider your definition. You can ask that Britain bring this before Ann Glennon.
The way it works is we would write to Ann Glennon.
Right.
No, it's not done.
Right, yeah. If that was something that was the major issue, what is this definition? You would, as Chairperson just said, you would write to Ann, and then she pretty much has the final word.
No one complains because there's no one there, which is ideal too. I would just like to see somehow more parking spaces, because I'm looking again at this aerial. People are on dirt roads. They're perpendicular. This is a Google map I'm looking at.
Right. Well, do you remember that's public beach parking? I don't know what you're looking at, but yes, the west side of that road is all permanent beach parking. East Hampton
What
down.
are you looking at?
It's a Google map.
Just to make it clear.
Right. So the west side of South Eaton here is East Hampton Town permit beach parking. It's not motel use.
Okay.
And aren't some of the spaces on the east side also, they don't belong to the hotel, if I recall?
They're right of way, aren't they?
That was a question.
That was a big issue the last time, if I recall correctly. That there was that
Technically, anybody from the public can park in any of those spots because it is technically a town road.
It was really the signage that was the issue.
And historically, it was used by the hotel because someone parks and walks up to their room.
And
But
the corner parking was a problem because of visibility.
and that was eliminated when that was brought up. I don't know if it was can't recall if it was the highway superintendent or if it was us, but prevented those southern, west, southwest corner from being parked in. But there has never been a ticketing parking issue. I believe I submitted early on in this application process, data sheets that prove that over 50% of the people who come to this hotel arrive by Uber, arrive by train, arrive by jitney. Not to say that exempts us from the parking requirement, but we actually don't use the parking that is there. It's never bursting at the seams. You can't, if we were bursting at the seams, you can't park along any of those streets because the town would ticket you thinking that you were, doing illegal beach parking. So we've never had a parking issue. The 3 parking spaces was, I have this place right here, which looked like a natural location to add a few more. Not because we're adding more guests, we're not adding more hotel rooms, we're not adding more employees, but why not? Throw it out there.
I'm good, thank you.
Sharon?
Yeah, no, I think this resolves a few things that we were dealing with from the last application. I'm very familiar with this property, and I've actually worked parties at this property, so I can answer some of those questions. And, they make everybody use the public parking. And I think the town in the review process of large parties really deals with where you're going to park, right? And they make guests come by bus, they get brought in, and then you have to use the public parking. And it worked very well. I don't remember it really being a mess there at all with the parking. And yeah, when you drive there, those are the right-of-way parking, but I do think that people just think they belong to the hotel, so nobody really parks there. So no, I think they've cleaned this up. I mean, the septic is huge. It is a very low-lying property, so I'm sure that's going to do great things for our beach. And if they keep it to the guests only, I think I can move forward with this.
Yeah, I agree with the previous board members. I think this application has come a long way. I think that Michael pointed out, a good point that I've, said in the past, which is this is a resort zone. This is the appropriate place for a resort type of places, and that's what this is. I think the issue is the parking, and the parking is way substandard for what we would ask for today. But you have it, it's there. I think that the restaurant or whatever we want to call it is an appropriate accessory. I also had the same questions about the definition there, although it might be a moot point because I don't think we have a better definition in the code. So I'm not sure that it matters if the board is willing to relax the parking. I think the other concern, as others have pointed out, is the service to the public. So I think that needs to be made very clear. In your narrative, your use, I think, it makes sense and it's fitting. I just think we have to make sure that's memorialized in the approval through conditions or a covenant or some means that, would have some enforceability to it. Although I trust that you're not, that you don't intend to do anything different. It's just we have to remember that once we have an approval in place, it's for you and anybody who owns the property in the, perpetuity, which, is a long time. One thing I noted, and this is probably a moot point because you're adding 3 spaces, but I don't think it's fully, I wouldn't expect you to have no extra employees. It seems like somebody needs to cook the food who's not already there or take it out. I believe it's 1 parking space per employee, so I think the 3 that you add get you there anyway. But I do want to make sure that, I want to be honest about what to expect. And I don't think adding a 1,000 square foot kitchen could be operated by the cashier or the maid or whoever else is already working on the site. I could be wrong, so if you want to elaborate on that, fine. But again, I think with the parking you're proposing, it is taken care of. So yeah, I've been through this with this application from the start. It has been a long haul, and I'm happy to see the outcome here and the board in agreement with what sounds like a sound proposal.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, the last time you did was about 2 years ago, I think, on this.
It was in person, so.
Yeah, but it was in person. So
right before COVID, it was probably January of
2020, yeah, okay, because, the 5 years, I mean, two of those
Or non-existent.
So, all right, I have a problem with the fact that really, the planning department is very strong on the idea that the catering is definitionally different than that creates a food service that I'm looking for where the planning department refer to the building inspector, the town attorney. The applicant's narrative seems to contradict what the entity is operating. What the entity is operating the on-site restaurant. I'm sorry.
I was like, I didn't.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think you're referring to what we wrote on Maidstone Acres.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. My concern is with the use of this, and well, this I know I'm reading, is what you say in your letter. Redesign the entire scope of the project, propose the addition of a room service and catering kitchen. And basically what you're saying is you're going to do catering on site in the 1,000 square foot kitchen downstairs. And, I mean, is that going to lay the groundwork for parking issues in the future? Because parking has always been the issue with this application. And, I'm concerned that we're going to have, by allowing this, by allowing the catering to go forward, down the road, there's going to be some kind of, there'll be, summertime will come and there'll be 1 week after the next, that there'll be people coming in for parties, and each and every time you're going to have to make an application to the board that covers mass gatherings, and the attitude may very well be, well, they've got this catering operation and the planning board approved it, so we're going to approve it every time. So I am concerned that, we are laying the groundwork for a lot of parking issues down the road. But there are other benefits that we're going to get. We're going to get the free, the two, was it three?
They're getting rid of 3, but replacing it with 2.
Thanks. So, we're getting that, and that's major in this location.
And we are open, just because I believe Michael brought it up, or maybe it was Ian, we are open to a covenant relating to use. That's something that, if the board feels more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'd like something that makes sure that we're not creating a situation that's going to go on, and because, you see, I just see a direct connection between the catering and the park. And I can see where that's going to continue, and then eventually somebody's going to say, every week I come here and cars are all over the place, and and who let this happen? So that would be us.
Well, no, it really, that really is that special permits board, because the second you have an issue with a special permit and you file another application, this is not for this property, I know from other clients of mine, the permit doesn't get issued. So I get your concern about the parking, but we have a board that reviews those one-off situations. The everyday occupation here is really, I got little kids that want chicken fingers in their hotel room.
Brendan, how do you think your clients would feel about limiting the catering to special events on site? In other words, maybe it would narrow it a little bit, Sam, if you can't just do catering for a party at the Lighthouse from this kitchen.
Oh,
well, I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, that's not. I'm not worried about you opening a catering operation.
Okay.
No, what I'm worried about is that we are basically not authorizing. That's really not what we're doing. But that we're putting in place a situation where, because it has catering, that we approve, that will lead to a continual parking issue. That's my concern.
But the situation in which you're using the catering is not day-to-day operations. Day-to-day operations is room service. If I'm using a catering kitchen and there's more than the 34 hotel room occupancy on the site, I have to go to that mass gathering committee that tells me, that tries to tell where my tent is, where my cars are parked, and it's very regulated.
Is it too far-fetched to think of the possibility that people would have parties in their rooms and like have, 20 people in their room or something like that.
Sure.
Would that be just
I mean, it's
out of the question?
one
because the
king
rooms are
size
too
bed in
big.
the bathroom,
Yeah, okay.
maybe 20 very small
Yeah,
people.
It's not, I'm thinking like the Waldorf or,
No, we have
something.
one unit that has 2 bedrooms, everything else is one bedroom.
That's not the catering that we're talking about.
No.
Look, I can't stand in the way. I would like to, the covenants that Ian mentioned, I think are important. Let's work that out so that down the road, we don't have other problems.
I have one more question for you, which is, Lou mentioned that the depth of groundwater is very shallow there.
Could we open up the septic plan? Because there's a test hole on that. I don't have it committed to memory, I admit.
So, how far do you go with the health department? Have they approved this system?
They've approved this system 3 times.
Really?
Not all the way approval, because I can't get their final approval until I have your final approval. But they've reviewed it as a 16C restaurant. They reviewed it as, and approved the design concept. And they also reviewed it as a, what's the other code determined, takeout food store. So they've seen it. Every rendition of this has gone through the health department.
And are you guys, are you gonna have to bring in fill?
No.
To get those leaching pools?
Can you scroll west? So, 7 feet. 7 feet below the surface, but we meet all of the separations to.
I was just wondering if the site would be disrupted by installing the septic system, but.
Oh, it's gonna be disrupted. It's huge.
But not permanently. Like
No.
not retaining walls.
No, that's the,
Okay.
if you've been to the property, that's the sort of pinnacle
Yeah,
location. You don't wanna lose that.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
open
what I
lawn
was
area.
wondering if the groundwater would.
No, one system goes under the parking area, one system goes in the lawn, and it will end up being the same grade. There's no proposed grades with the septic system. That's the easiest way to say it.
I'm just reading over with the planning department. The planning department's reading the section of the town code that even if no additional seating for the accessory use is proposed, additional parking is still required for the principal use motel. And I guess that what we're saying is that this is not an accessory use.
It's not well, it is an accessory use, but it's not an accessory restaurant to a resort. Which
you just read.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not. I think it's sort of what do they say? An accessory use is, normally incidental to the main use. And I think providing room service in a resort is an accessory use, and it's not a restaurant open to the public.
So, well, but then that's where the catering issue comes in, and covenants and restrictions should address that. I want to see that.
So we'll take a stab at that and maybe work with Nancy.
Does anyone else have anything on that? Ian, Sharon? How come I look up?
Hey, Sam, it's Eric. Can I just clarify our understanding of the code?
Please.
Just with regard to the nature of the use and the definition. What they're applying for is an accessory restaurant. An accessory restaurant is supposed to be exactly that. I think with what they wrote in their narrative, that meets the definition of an accessory restaurant. It's incidental and accessory to the principal use, which is a motel. I think the confusion is that, and I don't want to misrepresent the board's past deliberations, but was that perhaps the applicants were applying for a separate standalone principal restaurant use. And that's really the difference here. But what is in the code, this use is accessory restaurant as accessory to motel or resort. It's meant to be that. It's meant to be something that's incidental and subordinate. If you look in the code on the definition of an accessory use, that's how it defines it. So we're not saying that what they're proposing is not accessory. Quite the opposite. It seems to meet that definition. But I just want to make that distinction. A separate, if they were applying for a separate new principal use of a restaurant, that would carry with it a whole bunch of other standards. They wouldn't be able to do it for a number of reasons, sanitary and parking being the most glaring. But what they're proposing, what they've asked for from day one, well, for years now, is an accessory restaurant. It sounds to me like what they're describing is an accessory restaurant. And that's why we were, quoting in the memorandum what the parking requirement is, because that was the big sticking point the last time this was discussed, where the nature of the operation was represented a bit differently. But so I'm just clarifying, our understanding is they are applying for an accessory restaurant, not a new principal restaurant use.
And I'd like to hear the applicant, because that is something I like, if you would like to.
I don't really, it doesn't matter to me how we define it, as much as the purpose is for on-site, on-premise dining and there's no dining area. It's the people's rooms, or it's them sitting by the pool. It's for our hotel guests. However, the town
That was always the stumbling block or the sticking point. It wasn't so much how you define it or what the code said. The fear of the board in prior deliberations was that they were creating an accessory use that would draw people other than the residents of the hotel. That it would become overcrowded because there would be third-party customers coming in and flooding the property with crowds and noise and excess parking. So I think we've gotten to the point, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, is that it doesn't matter what the definition is. It's an accessory use, but the applicant is agreeing that it will only service the in-hotel residents. And I think that what Sam is calling for, a covenant, is going to address that and make sure that that will always be the case. Well, does everybody agree on that?
Yeah, and we've designed it as such. We put the basement, the kitchen's in the basement. There's no point of sale. I don't have a restaurant sign hanging out front. We did all those architectural measures to address the concerns that we've heard over these years. We talked about having parking passes or bracelets or, tracking people. The best way to do it is just to have a use that no one sees and that no one can get into, and there's no place to eat.
Yeah, I think it's important actually that we don't call this the town board now has defined a restaurant as accessory to a resort or transient motel. This is not a restaurant according to the definition in the code. I think it's pretty clear. And that if we approve this as a restaurant as accessory to a resort and waive the parking, what the planning department is saying, yeah, but you're not waiving, it just creates a whole series of problems.
Yeah.
That's why I say we're approving a modification to a resort that has an accessory kitchen or room service, and it's not an accessory restaurant to a resort.
Well, whether we do that through a covenant or we cite the proper code.
Yeah, I just think if we use this, it causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a kitchen restaurant thing that I think we're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think this does not provide, furnished indoor seating.
So,
and it's not open to the public. So I don't think it's not a restaurant to me.
No,
Yeah.
Again, I come back to the questions after us to decide.
Again, it would be if you want to send it over to Ann, but then again, if you don't,
If we don't see it, that we send things to Ann when we just don't know.
Right.
But it sounds like, as a practical matter, we do know.
Yeah.
You consider it a kitchen, not a restaurant.
Eric, are you happy with that? Are you comfortable with that?
No, not at all. Sorry to be that blunt. I mean, Ian stated that it might be a moot point, but I agree with that. If the board feels that, if the board feels it can meet all its standards, but my understanding of why this was added to the town code was to permit food service, whether or not it had seats. The code is not clear on that, but food service as incidental and subordinate, meaning an accessory use to an existing, in this case, motel. The distinction is whether or not you had a standalone second use as a restaurant. So yes, I understand that physically, it might not look like a restaurant because they're not proposing seating. They are proposing food service that's incidental to their existing motel use. I think the code is clear, adopted. Yeah, I see it as an accessory use. And an accessory use is supposed to be, part of the operation of the principal use. That's what the applicants are proposing. I'm not saying this as a sticking point of saying what they're proposing is, saying it in a negative or a positive light. I just think it's clear that that's what that use definition is in the code. I think that it's kind of a semantic argument in trying to get around them needing to meet the special permit standards for a restaurant as accessory. But to me, it's clearly that's what they're asking for. And those are the applicable standards. I agree with Nancy, though. If there is any confusion over it, Ann Glennon is the one as the principal building inspector empowered by the code to make a determination. But I think that's why these special permit standards were adopted, was for a situation like this.
So I don't see why this is an issue, why we should be afraid of making this decision then. It sounds like we have the authority to waive the parking. They've given us a narrative and a reason why it might be a good idea to waive it at this point. It's sort of been a grandfathered running hotel for many, many years. They're not increasing their capacity in terms of, new hotel rooms. So I don't know why we're nervous about making that decision.
I think it's a bad precedent because there are hotels, motels in Montauk that have accessory restaurants that they advertise for, that they invite the public to.
But this is different. They're not doing that.
They're not doing that. And what's more is maybe I'm misreading the memo, but I thought the planning department was saying, even if you approve this as a restaurant as accessory to a resort, which is defined in the code, then you can waive the parking for the restaurant, but you have to go back to the original use, the principal use, and provide parking for that.
No, that's not what the code says. The code says that the parking calculation is to be based on the parking requirement for the principal use under the existing code section, which is high because it's for a motel, it's based on the number of bedrooms, and then at 50% for a restaurant. If it was a principal separate secondary use, that's your parking calculation. Once that's established, the planning board, if it sees fit, if there's adequate parking nearby, if it's not going to be a detriment to the neighborhood or to residential properties, has the authority to waive any amount of that parking requirement. But there's two different things there. The first step is establishing what the parking requirement is. If you're adding an accessory restaurant use, you add the principal use and 50% of the accessory. And then from there, the planning board can determine whether or not it wants to waive the parking.
We can waive it all.
Let me just say, that anticipates that we would define this as a restaurant. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
As
So,
an accessory restaurant, standalone secondary use.
but if we have covenants and restrictions that define it as catering or room service associated with, I want to find the right word, with a restaurant, with a motel, then that doesn't trigger the whole issue of whether or not we're undermining, and that's my concern, that we undermine the restaurant as accessory to a resort or a transient motel. If we define this as being restaurant as accessory to a resort or transient motel, that's putting this, assuming that covenants and restrictions make it clear that it's all it's going to be, that puts this in the same category as all those other motels that advertise restaurants. And I don't think I don't think we should be doing that. I think we undermine this law.
I actually,
I'm pointing at you.
okay, sorry. I sorry, a little tricky being remote here. I actually really agree with Eric, and I respect this conversation, and I get the concern. And I struggled with the code for a long time today. Usually we try to find the most similar use when there's not a perfect match. And I looked at retail, like you would think of a deli, or takeout food, which in fact was banned, a while back by the town board, because both of those uses are more explicitly open to the public. I actually think we'd be more at risk of setting a negative precedent here to just say that, hey, you can build a kitchen because you're allowed one in a resort. And I think that's what we're saying if we don't call it a restaurant that is a separate accessory use, which I believe that it is an accessory use if you're cooking food. We don't assume that anybody with motel or hotel units can cook food. And I think if we try to skirt around this issue, I wish there was a more perfect fit. But I think we accomplish our goal by avoiding precedent by saying they can't serve the public. So we say you're allowed a restaurant, but you can't serve the public. And therefore, we aren't inviting any problems in the future. In fact, we're explicitly saying the reason we're waiving this parking requirement is because you're not going to serve the public. And I think further to the point, 10 years ago, this application would not have had to require the parking if it were accessory. The town board changed that, and they explicitly left us an out to waive that, to recognize what had been the standard practice. So I get this conversation, and I struggled with it for hours today, frankly, and had the same instinct originally. But I think that the precedent we'd be setting would be worse to not approve this explicitly as an accessory use to a hotel or resort. And I think the covenant saves us from setting any negative precedent.
Let me ask everybody, what about some to the building department?
No, I think what Eric just said, and not Eric, Ian, we just, it doesn't matter as long as we have that covenant. That's the fear. That takes care of the fear that we've always had to open it up to the public. So if it's an accessory use as a restaurant, so what? But if we have the covenant, that protects us from having that fear. We don't have to go through this.
The precedent we're setting is that we will approve a restaurant
with the covenant
as accessory to a resort with no increase in parking.
No, that's not true. You have 3 parking spaces being proposed. We're not waiving parking.
Well, it's not. I think what we're. You see, this is why we make.
It's not a precedent.
This is why we
can waive the parking per each individual.
We don't need
I
to.
want. We should stay away from the moment, the parking issue. The idea here is that if we approve this, it has to be under a very specific set of circumstances, namely that the catering, the kitchen, is only going to be used as is proposed currently for room service and catering. And to the extent that it involves catering, that's going to be subject to the mass gathering applications. So basically what we're saying is the only thing that we would approve, the only precedent that this creates is if a motel wants to have a kitchen that they're only going to use for the purpose of room service. Now, if we all agree on that and it's clear, then I think we can move on without the danger of creating a precedent that's going to, change everything in the way that motels operate, because they're all going to have to come in with that same exact set of circumstances as I just described, or they'll be rejected. Or, alternatively, we can take the application, we can take the definition, and we can hand it to the building department and say, does it fit? And then we know going forward that it's not our policy that we're creating, it's something that's consistent with what the building department says.
But excuse me, Sam, the accessory allows us to waive the parking on an individual case-by-case basis. So we're not setting a precedent. We're saying in this particular case, we're approving the accessory use of a restaurant, and we're waiving the parking requirement because we extracted a covenant from the applicant that they would only use this for servicing the clients only, the customers, the hotel.
And there's no dining room. I mean, that's another thing. You could say in the covenant, there's no dining room, so
Yeah, you don't.
where's the public?
That aspect strengthens the argument.
Where's the
that
public
it's
gonna eat?
unlawful.
But it's
Right,
raining.
but just don't with a restaurant.
But that's easy.
Because it doesn't matter what
It
you
does, it does, because we're approving a restaurant.
Yeah.
No,
Restaurants.
I'm in agreement with Lou and Ian here. I think, I don't think this needs to go to Ann Glennon. I do think, we've been given jurisdiction to waive the parking, and if we have that covenant and restriction, we've pretty much covered our reasoning for why we're doing it.
There's a whole list in the code. There's a whole list in the code that tells us why we can do that. Again, the history here is important. It used to be presumed if it was accessory, it was allowed. You basically got parking. This code is fairly recent, and they left us this explicit out, which was how things always would have operated before the code changed. And it says we can waive the parking requirement if there's a determination that after the site plan addition of the accessory use, subject to conditions and/or mitigation, will provide sufficient parking, not result in additional traffic congestion or significant increase in the risk of vehicular or pedestrian accidents, and promote sound community planning. I think we've met all of those standards here. And I think if those standards are met the next time somebody comes before us, we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis, but I would approve it again. I think we're at much more risk to set a precedent that people can just build a kitchen without having to call it a different use. Because I think that we would all agree that having a kitchen or not is significant, and we want to see that.
Right. I agree.
I totally agree. And I think that Lou makes a good point that if you do, approve that use, which is, again, that's a use that the applicants applied for. And as long as you feel that you have adequate mitigation measures, as expressed, not having a dining area, their offer of conditions or covenants, then I would urge you to view this through that lens of the use being an accessory restaurant, and just saying that for the ultimately, if you do approve the application, saying that you approve it because you find those mitigation measures offered by the applicant adequate to address those issues.
And that won't do violence to the code. That we won't be running the risk of undermining the code and the definition in the code, because we will be following.
It was designed to allow for this very specifically.
Yeah, are you comfortable with a finding that the parking is adequate there? Isn't that what we're supposed to find?
I am, you know what I mean? The answer is, before, I would say no.
Right.
But now I'm willing to say yes, because they're specifically saying there's no restaurant.
Right.
They're specifically, to the extent that there will be outsiders, if you will, non-guests coming into the hotel, it's going to be subject to an application for the planning events, whatever the events.
Committee.
Committee. So it's not,
We should find out what they're
on
called.
top of everything, I know, you're all consistent.
I think you're blessing their existing parking with this approach.
But
Hey, go ahead, majority rules.
well, it's more than the blessing than enough. Listen, the parking is a serious issue, and that's what held me up the last time. But what held me up was the idea that they were opening a restaurant and creating.
The parking's way pre-existing even without a restaurant. And you're going to be saying that you find the parking for this resort and restaurant use to be adequate.
No, we're not. We're saying that.
That's what you have.
We're saying the restaurant
No, we're
use
saying-
as limited by the
We're
covenants and
saying
restrictions.
we're relaxing the parking requirements. We don't
Go
find
ahead, go ahead.
We don't find it.
I
We
said
don't
what I
find it.
think, and I know.
We don't find the parking adequate, but because of the mitigating factors, we're relaxing those parking requirements.
All right.
Okay.
Michael, do you have anything? You look like you have something else.
I would love to see the language of covenant.
Yeah, that's.
I would like to see.
And that's
Me
a
too.
good way for us to wrap. Okay, so.
So just to be clear, I'm gonna make some minor revisions on, no, I'm not making anything.
No. What
I'm
you
just
gave us
submitting
is
a
what you're
comment.
giving us. That's it. It's a question of the verbiage.
Okay. We will work on that. We'll be back in person.
And don't take 2 years.
Thank you. Don't have COVID happening.
I'm trying to avoid
No pandemic.
full pandemic. Thank you very much. Okay, we have one more matter on, we also, let's not forget that, we have a resolution after we're done with this. Thank you for waiting, we appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have the site plan on Maidstone Acres 2, 28 Maidstone Park Road. This is Marco, or
Eric.
who's this? Eric, are you covering this?
Yeah, I'm gonna be handling.
Okay, and this ordinarily would have been Ed's, but Ian is going to step up and pinch it. All right, and you, sir, you want to give us a name?
Yes, sir. James Wahadamas of Wahadamas and Hillen, representing the applicant. Good evening, everybody. It's the first time I'm meeting the board, so nice to meet everybody.
Well,
thank you.
By the way, you see how it works. First, planning department gives their speech, but you give an opportunity to speak, and then we turn it over to the board.
Thank you very much.
Go right ahead, Eric.
Sure. I'm going to share screen here, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. I hope you can now. Please let me know.
And we see it loud. We see picture.
All right, thanks. So this is an aerial photograph of the location of the property. It's situated in Springs, near 3 Mile Harbor, the mouth of 3 Mile Harbor, and Maidstone Park, in the north of Springs. There was a previous site plan application that was recently drawn. That happened this past November. Due to inactivity and lack of providing the required submission elements to the planning board. This is basically a follow-up of that site plan application. This property is zoned neighborhood business. It's a little tough to see here, but the yellow lines are the zoning districts. This is the only commercially zoned property in this area. Everything around it is residential in use and zoning. And the property itself is 100% cleared. It is over the maximum allowable total lot coverage currently, and it contains a 76-seat restaurant use and 2 residences on a lower level. This is a type 2 action under SECRA. The nature of the application was a little bit difficult to derive from the submitted materials. I suppose the most efficient use of the board's time would be to allow the applicant's attorney to explain exactly what they're asking for in terms of use and structures. But basically, and I won't go through everything here, but the board in the previous site plan application had outlined a number of elements that were outstanding for the application. That included floor plans. They have submitted floor plans, but they're not clearly labeled. It looks like one of them is for an outdoor space, the other is for indoor. But that needs some clarification. You had asked for a parking layout and parking calculations. That was not provided on the most recent survey, which I will skip to now and hopefully everyone can see. That is the most recent survey. And you had asked them to specify the number of residential units and the number of persons residing in them. You know, they clarified that there are 2 residential units. They're counted as single-family residences. Upon further review of building department records, there was no information about the number of persons residing there. We just note that because it was something the board had asked for. You also asked for information on the septic system. You'll see there's a number of circles throughout this survey. They have stuff to read at this scale, or they have an S over them. The surveyor just denoted those as steel covers. I suspect those are individual septic tanks that formulate the sanitary system. The applicants have identified that there are separate systems for the residences and the restaurant. So all that information still needs to be submitted. Those are still outstanding items. Additionally, we'd note that the previous site plan that we submitted had a number of structures that are existing on site that have been removed from this survey. That includes areas of stockade fencing, a brick patio, and some other improvements. And just as a reminder, all existing and proposed site conditions need to be provided on the site plan. And we also need existing and proposed coverage calculations. on that plan. So the main issue here, I think, is the catering aspect of the operation. During the previous site plan application, the board discussed with the applicants how the proposed storage trailers, if you remember, that was the main thing that was asked for, a storage trailer parking space, how those trailers would be used. The applicant stated at that time, and have readdressed in the recently submitted narrative, that they are to be used for an accessory catering business. The board should read the applicant's narrative, though. The board had previously stated that once they had a more detailed narrative, that they would bring that to the building inspector to determine basically whether or not that operation represents something that was incidental and accessory to an existing restaurant, or whether or not it represented a standalone new single and separate use. We will defer to the building inspector and the town attorney to make that determination. If on-site catering operations are for businesses other than the on-site restaurant, which is Rita Cantina, it is possible this would be deemed a new use. Should the catering operations be only in conjunction with the on-site restaurant, that individual business, then it's possible the building inspector will deem them as accessory. And that's, although you do not have that in writing, that is my understanding of the building inspector's take on that situation. I don't mean to misquote them or quote them without them putting it in writing, but I have had a number of conversations with Ann Glennon about this project. So the applicants in the narrative, and again, I'll let their attorney speak to this. I don't want to misrepresent them, but stated that there were a number of LLCs that are involved with the operation of this facility. One of them operates the Rita Cantina restaurant, and then there's another that operates two businesses that are not located on this site. But I don't want to misrepresent what they wrote or what their position is, but again, that is in their narrative. However, whether the building inspector deems the catering function as a separate new use or as an accessory use, we note the limitations that the site has with properly providing for such operation. The lot is 0.16 acres in size, which is just over 7,000 square feet, contains a restaurant and 2 residential units, has no on-site parking, and has no space for a loading or unloading area for trucks or trailers to be used in conjunction with a catering operation. Such activities would almost certainly need to be conducted in the adjoining roadways, most likely Maidstone Park Road, which is also currently used as the parking for the restaurant. It's again noted that the surrounding neighborhood is entirely residential in use and zoning. For these reasons, we feel that the site is inherently a poor location for this increased intensity of use and would recommend that it not be permitted. The board, though, should read the applicant's narrative regarding the nature of use or the nature of the operation, of the catering operation. I won't go into everything here, but they discuss that trailers will be brought, trucks and trailers will come to the site. Food that's prepared on site will be loaded into those vehicles and then brought to off-site locations. They spoke to the frequency of the use of trailers and trips. They estimate that during the summer months, there'd be 12 trips per week. Yeah, obviously with the highest frequency, you know, again, being during the summer season. But again, the applicant's narrative should have been attached to our memorandum. It's also in the file. The board should read that. Part of that narrative on the nature of the operation is they say that when the trucks and trailers do go to an off-site location to perform the catering function, that they would take the garbage that's produced from that operation and bring it back to this property. We would note, and you can see it if you look, hopefully you can see this close-up aerial. And then if you look on Richardson Avenue, which is the southern boundary of this property, and hopefully you can see my cursor, you'll see in this back parking lot area, which is near the entrance to the residences, there's a truck parked here, which is this white rectangle you see. This here is a dumpster. To my knowledge, that's the only one that is basically permanently, I won't even say on-site, but at the location right now. These lines, these property lines that you see in red are a little bit off, but that is basically entirely within the right-of-way, that parking area. So we need to determine if the submitted narrative is adequate, in particular with regard to the nature of the catering operation. And then you probably want to seek a further determination from the building inspector as to whether or not that represents an accessory use or a new single and separate principal use. However, regardless of the building inspector's determination, we still find that this location is inherently unsuited for a catering operation as it was described in the narrative. The board is encouraged to consider the site plan standards when considering this issue. The board's complete set of standards were attached to the memo. However, we think that you should pay special consideration to 4 of your site plan standards in particular. I won't read them all verbatim, but the heading kind of speaks for themselves. First is the protection of residential areas. Again, this is a commercial property in terms of zoning and use, but is entirely surrounded by residential zoning and use. Parking areas are supposed to be designed adequately and screened from view. Again, this site has no existing on-site parking. Access, whether or not vehicular access is adequate and on-site circulation is adequate. There really is no ability for on-site circulation here. Most of the lot is entirely the restaurant and residence building. And again, we would reiterate that we would expect that, if there are, the operations described in the narrative would most likely involve parking trucks on Maidstone Park Road, blocking part of that road. That's also an issue of public access down that public street. And then again, it's compared to those other issues, it's minor. But the issue of, waste disposal, whether it be carting off of refuse and garbage, but also, adequate sewage, in this case, individual sanitary systems. Again, the information, there wasn't adequate information to ascertain exactly what the existing system is. But in looking through the building department records and the survey, it looks like it's individual, septic tanks. I see no record in the past 30 years that there was any sanitary upgrade on this property. Although, and if the applicants are, if it is deemed that the catering function is going to be a new single and separate use, that not only triggers an additional parking requirement, but that additional parking requirement, as I read the code, would necessitate a comprehensive site upgrade to a low nitrogen sanitary system. So really, in summary, I think the question here, and it probably is one that needs to be answered by the building inspector, is whether or not the catering operation represents a new use, or if it is permitted as accessory to an existing restaurant. And that will be largely based on your conversation with the applicants this evening, as well as anything that you might require additional in writing, and then, of course, sending that to the building inspector. But that's really the key issue to discuss this evening.
Thank you for that very thorough report.
Yes. So thank you, Mr. Shantz. I appreciate that. So Mr. Shantz is correct in the sense that we believe that the definition, as you discussed in your previous application, that the board heard tonight, the definition here of catering and restaurant and things like that is also going to be important here. It's our understanding that within the town of East Hampton, that catering is considered an accessory use to a restaurant. And it's the applicant's position here that we're doing the same thing. This property has a very, very long history as a restaurant. My understanding in talking to the current owner in his conversations historically, that this location was originally like a local general store that then developed into a restaurant, and it's been as such for a long time. I've spoken to at least one prior restaurant operator who indicated that they did catering out of this location without issue for many, many years. I think the distinction here, the obvious distinction, is that the tenant at the location is now using these trucks and trailers to deliver the catering offsite. And I think that's the major distinction between how this property had been operated throughout its history as a restaurant to how it's been operated since in or about 2021. Our position as the applicant is the only distinction here is the trucks and trailers that come to the location to pick up the food and then deliver it. All right, the Hampton Clam Bake and Food Co. have been, catering in this community for over 20 years. And we highlighted in the narrative the distinction between those two entities. But as I've said in my previous conversations regarding this matter, there are two entities. There's no question that there are two entities. It's Miller Brothers Hospitality and Sill Mill Catering. However, they're owned by the same people. So yes, there are distinct entities, but there's a significant overlap in the sense that the human beings behind the operations of the restaurant are the same. For example, Eric Miller is the one who cooks the food. He's the head chef and owner at Rita Cantina. He's cooking the food for those who are eating at Rita Cantina, those who may order to-go food from Rita Cantina, the restaurant, and also he's the one cooking the catering. So there is a commonality as far as the operations. There is a distinction in the entities that are used. However, it's our understanding that the majority of the other restaurants and catering companies in the town of East Hampton operate very similarly in the fact that it may seem or appear to be, one business, but, from the legal perspective behind the scenes, there may be multiple entities.
Can I ask you a question?
Things like
Mind if I interrupt you?
Oh, sure. Yes, sir. Thank you.
If Sill Mill Catering because of debt, does Miller Brothers Hospitality have liability for that debt?
I don't know the exact answer for that.
They're different LLCs, they're different corporations.
They are.
One guy's on the invoice, the other guy isn't. So.
As far as the name of the entity, there's no question about that, Mr. Kramer. Yes, there is no question about it.
I didn't mean to sidetrack you. It's just,
no.
You're saying that now they're effectively the same, but you do have separate corporations.
That's a fact. Yes,
LLCs.
Yes, that is a fact, sir. Yes, there's no denying the fact that, and there's also no denying the fact that one of them was in existence before the other, right? So the Miller Brothers Hospitality, at least, with the respect of Rita Cantina, is new, whereas the Sill Mill Catering was the business that existed prior to the creation of the restaurant. So yeah, that is 100% accurate in that sense.
Like I said, I didn't mean to distract you.
No, sir.
They're two different entities. So
I think it's clear that there's an issue here, right? And that's the reason why we're here. I think the board is very well aware, and as plannings that we're here because of town code action, right? There are multiple violations against the property, of which we've been appearing before Judge Rana in the Justice Court here since May of last year. And there've been significant conferences with the town attorney's office, obviously with the court. And, just to let the board know, we intentionally let the prior application be withdrawn. It was done intentionally after, conversations and meetings with the town attorney's office, and the deficiencies therein. I wasn't the attorney handling it at the time, and the goal was to withdraw that previous application so that I, as the attorney for the applicant now, I was handling the town code violations throughout this process. But now on behalf of the applicant, I would be submitting it and I would be presenting it to the board so that hopefully, because there's this overlap between the activity going on in the court, that I'd be able to, offer to the board and answer the questions that, maybe the applicant by himself wouldn't be able to do, understanding the legalities and definition and the code that, needs to be considered. We thought it would be best that, I handle that. So I wanted to address the reason why the prior application was withdrawn.
Appreciate that. Why don't you continue then?
Sure. So, as far as the residential portion, we just want to make it clear that as far as the restaurant operations are concerned, they have nothing to do with the residential portion. So, they're not connected in the sense that, there's no, the business use of the property, it doesn't entitle it to the residential use. So they are distinct in that fashion. I will tell you that, Eric Miller lives in one of them. However, it is pursuant to a separate and distinct legal agreement between the property owner and Mr. Miller. So, as far as the residence is concerned, we've listed it, Mr. Girardi, when he purchased the property, those residences were there. I do understand that at some point in time, there may be some things done with the residences, but there is a basement apartment and the house portion of it, or where Eric Miller lives. I apologize to the board. I don't have the exact number of people that live there, but I will get that information and make sure that I provide that so that the board is fully aware of it. As far as the sanitary system, oh, yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask you if either of these entities are the property, who is the property owner here?
Okay, so that's correct. So the property owner is not, we had to list, what's interesting here is I think on our application, we actually listed both companies as the applicant, because quite frankly, it is let's call it the landlord and the tenant applying for this together. It's not a distinct, whereas, the tenant is applying for it without the support of the landlord, or it's the landlord applying for it without the necessity of the tenant.
Understood. Who has title for the property?
Yes.
DNR Family LLC.
Correct. So that's what I was getting at. Okay. DNR Family LLC is the entity that owns it, which has nothing to do with restaurant operations or anything like that. Correct.
And the residences are also owned by DNR, what is it?
Correct. Because
they own the whole
park. Correct. So Mr. Parsons, it's one lot owned by DNR, and it happens to have the commercial and residential uses as the tenant, the commercial tenant. They have nothing to do with the residential portion, in the sense that it's not like if you rent the restaurant, you get the residences with it. Okay. They're separate. So DNR operates them distinctly in the sense that there's a lease agreement for the commercial portion, and there are separate. I'm happy to answer specific questions.
I will have our conversation. I want to give you the opportunity to really, it's my own, I shouldn't have been rubbed in the first place. If you want to continue, you can continue.
Sure.
Or I can turn it over to the board, and then we'll end up shooting more questions at you, however you want to do it. I know if I'm standing there at the podium, I want to talk.
Well, I just want to address one other matter, because quite frankly, it's something that we know is a topic of discussion, the sanitary system. So what's interesting about it is, when I spoke to the gentleman, Mr. Girardi, Rich Girardi, who's, the owner of the LLC that owns the property, I asked him specifically about the sanitary system, and he, just told me bluntly, he said, James, I got to be honest with you, I've owned the property for 20 years now. We've never had to do anything to it. So as Mr. Shan said, there's, as far as we know, over 30 years with no amendments or no modifications to the sanitary system. The property owner said, he goes, I've never actually had to open it up. We never had to, other than, service, like general servicing.
You're laughing, man. Yeah, that's not, sorry.
No,
that's not good news.
Well, I'm not saying it in the sense that it's unnecessary, like, we're not maintaining it. I don't want to say that. I want to say that in the sense that there's never been a necessity to open up the ground and, see what's in there. There hasn't been any applications or any changes that will require an upgrade to the sanitary system. So with respect to the, our knowledge of the sanitary system, it's unfortunately very limited, just because it hasn't been a situation that needed to be modified or investigated or looked into. We're more than happy to look into it and investigate and find out exactly what's there moving forward in order to address the concerns of the board. Absolutely. But I'll be very honest with you, when we asked about it and tried to, see what can we do to see what kind of sanitary system is there. By way of documents, there's really nothing that exists because of the age of the property. And by way of anybody having any personal knowledge of it, unfortunately, there's just nobody that we know of that has personal knowledge of the sanitary system. Although, as Mr. Shantz indicated, we do understand that they are separate and distinct systems with respect to the system for the residential portion versus the system with the commercial portion. As far as the parking, I think that's another point of, it's obviously clear. When Mr. Shantz had the aerial, you could see that this property is in the middle of a residential district and has been for quite some time. There's no getting around that. And we worked extensively over the summer and into the early fall with the highway department. So through our proceedings in the town the town court, obviously code enforcement's been there, building department's been there, all those things, highway department's been there. So back in the summertime, there was an issue with the fencing. And a modification to that fence. And that's what triggered the highway department. So the property owner brought the highway department to the location where it was determined that although it hadn't been done before, that the site triangle needed to be applied and the fence height needed to be modified in order to the liking of the highway department. So there were meetings at the location. There was some modifications done to the locations of the fencing. As Mr. Shantz said, the problem with this property is that it literally goes right up, like almost to the street. So, normally you have, a property line and then maybe you see some grass or you see something and then you see the roadway. At this location, quite frankly, it doesn't exist. The asphalt, I believe, on the south side literally goes up to the building. And we, the right of way was a big issue this summer because there are people that were parking in the right of way against the signs that were there that were put there by the town officials. There are no parking signs there. So they had to modify the fence locations in order to alleviate some of the parking concerns that were there. But, there's not enough room on this property to have on-site parking, right? So it just doesn't exist. There's no property in the community that can afford, on-site parking. So it's been down to this, in my understanding, how it's operated for many years. It's just the local streets act as the parking areas for it. So we did comply with what the highway department wanted, and we depicted that those modifications on the site plan as far as where the fence locations are today and where we intend them to be and what we're seeking approval for. Yes. So I would ask the board. I would love to hear the comments and questions from the board, and I'd be happy to answer anything. Oh, what, real quick before I say, I do want to say we hope to ask for an adjournment at some point so that we can address the deficiencies that Mr. Shantz had highlighted.
We can talk about that.
Okay.
After the discussion.
Thank you.
Ian, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the applicant. I also want to thank Eric Shantz because honestly, on what is a pretty complicated application, I think Eric really laid out all the important points in his memo, and I think that I'll just start by saying that should be your guide. But yeah, I think this is really an issue of the nature of the application. It seems to be that there seems to be some conflicting info, especially when we consider the last application, which I understand is intentionally withdrawn, but it seems like the intended use and the violations associated with this application remain the same. So we will want to reconcile the two or explicitly say what's proposed and what's not. Foundationally, I think that, the applicant's right. There's a restaurant here that legally exists. There are also violations and neighborhood complaints. The applicant has recognized that. I think it's in everybody's interest to resolve this quickly. I want to be fair here to the neighbors, to the applicants, and find a solution that's compatible with everything. And so I'm happy you're before us, and I hope that this is a constructive process. With that said, I defer to Chairman Sam Kramer on this, but I think that the speed of getting this taken care of is important. You mentioned an adjournment. I'm not sure how willing I would be to adjourn it for long, because this could drag on for another season or for a long period of time. I think we should lay the issues out on the table, resolve them, or figure out what can be resolved and move forward. Of course, there's a process involved, but I think that this has been the type of thing that we would expect a response, and significantly addressing the issues that come up here tonight, that Eric raised, that I'm raised, and other board members raised, within about 30 days. Again, I defer to Sam on that, but the expectation is going to be that this moves quick and does not drag out for, whatever reason. Essentially, we need to know what's proposed, what's there to remain there, what's to be constructed, what's to be removed. The most recent site plan we've seen has a lot of things not depicted that were depicted in the last one. I think there's a patio that still exists. I think that there are trailers or trucks that are intended to be on property. I'm not positive about that. They were illustrated in the previous site plan, not this one. A smoker, gravel, stone area, storage, all the things that Eric mentioned in the menu, in the memo. That probably was not an inclusive list, but we need to know the details of everything that's going to be there, what exists and is going to be removed. We need to be explicit about that. Likewise, we'll need to see floor plans and seating charts with numbers. I know during COVID, I believe this operation opened during COVID, where outdoor seating was important. We still can't increase the number of seats from what's proposed. And the fact that you have a legally pre-existing restaurant that has a previous approval with seating numbers and all this, it should be pretty easy to get there. And maybe there's an ability to move some seats around, but you can't just increase it, because although this is zone neighborhood business and allows for a restaurant, it would never be approved today with the parking the way it is. And so anything we do to exacerbate that parking problem, I think is going to be a really hard sell before this board. Perhaps you could go for a variance. That's not my jurisdiction, but I think that's a pretty tough sell too.
We have no intention, there's no application or intention to increase the seating whatsoever. The applicant understands that any outdoor seating would reduce correspondingly the indoor seating.
Great. Yeah, we just need real clarity on that in the application, so that whatever is approved here or whatever we act on is really clear, and again is fair to everybody and compatible with the neighborhood, fair to the applicant, fair to the neighbors, and compatible. And there's been a restaurant here for many years, and as far as I know, there weren't problems. So I think this is resolvable. I think we definitely need the info on the residents. It's the same property, even though the use is separate. That's just part of our process. We don't look at individual aspects without looking at the whole site. That I guess extends to the septic system. We want location info, confirm that it's separate from the residents and the business. It sounds like you yourself don't have a ton of info, but are willing to look into it. That's great. We appreciate that. The age is important. There are certain types of septic systems that have been banned. As you know, normally upgrades are triggered by some sort of increase in, increase in use, but there are septic systems that are old enough and that there may be issues. So we'll need that info, and of course, if you go to the health department, they would too. I'm not sure at this point if you're anticipating triggering that, but that's all the more reason, if you're not going before the health department, for us to make sure we have the basic info to ensure that you're not supposed to be. And then that brings us to the biggest issue here, which is the catering use. I understand how a catering use can be accessory to a restaurant, and the applicant made a good argument for that. I also understand that the catering on the beach, is part of our community. I worked for a catering company for a long time, so I know that business a bit. And it's not nothing, catering, driving everything to a beach or to a offsite location, unloading, the trash it generates, bringing it back can be a significant endeavor. And so I ultimately, that's a building inspector decision, whether it's accessory or whether it's distinct. But I have concerns. I have some real concerns where how that operation is going to fit, how the storage of the vehicles, equipment, garbage, propane, all those things are going to fit. And it needs to be explicitly illustrated on the site plan. There was an area on the last site plan that showed where trailers could be parked that have just been removed. If trailers and storage and trucks are part of that operation, we need to know where on site it's going to be stored. And I think that's problematic because there's not very much room, or how that business is going to operate without on-site storage. We just need more info. I don't want to prejudge it, but I just want to say that I do have concerns. I also think there's some current, again, it'll be a building inspector determination ultimately, but the entities and the complexity there, the fact that Rita Cantina is the newest entity to all of them, but the others are accessory to Rita Cantina, raises some flags, or at least begs some questions. I don't want to have a closed mind about this, but I think the idea of an accessory catering situation to a restaurant is one where you basically take the food that's already in the restaurant and sell it someplace else. And it's not clear to me that that's the case so far with this. And again, there's no judgment on any of the businesses. And as you say, even though there's different LLCs, the same ownership. But that's not the standard we used. I couldn't have a restaurant and also be an attorney out of the same place and just say, I'm the same person, it's okay. These are distinct uses, and we've got to do more than just saying the owner is, the same, so it's okay. I think it's conceivable that catering is accessory, and it's conceivable that catering is distinct in a separate business or two separate businesses perhaps, and we just need clarity on that, and we'll want to get that narrative, very, very soon. Landscaping and lighting, I think we're going to want to do whatever we can to beautify the area. Not a lot of room, I understand. The lighting, again, not my area of expertise, but I think it's pretty blatantly not compliant right now. I'm not saying you need to submit that right now, because I think it's something that of all the things we're talking about here, you could get fixtures that meet our code. But we are going to need to see those, because that's another invasive part of your existence in the neighborhood. So I look forward to what others have to say. Again, I thank the applicant for being here. I thank Eric. I think the bottom line is that there is a restaurant here that is allowed ultimately. You have an approved site plan that you're operating off of, or existing conditions. There have been no problems for many years. I think there have been a lot of problems in recent years and complaints, and we've already received some communication from neighbors. I think it's good that you're here. I want to resolve it. And again, I want to be fair to you, to the neighbors, and we want to be compatible. This is a very unique thing with a small commercial neighborhood business zone in a neighborhood. And one of our jobs as a planning board is to make sure that everything fits together while recognizing what you have legally there already. It just seems like this has grown a little bit, and we need to sort of harness it in and get some clarity on exactly how it's operating. So, ultimately, I think we need a lot more information, explicitly addressing what's going to be there, what's going to be removed, how everything's going to operate. And I think this is the kind of thing we would want to have in 30 days. And so your request of an adjournment is understandable. I, for one, would want to push towards expediency while being thorough as a board to make sure that we do the right thing here. I think these issues are resolvable or not. We just need more information to determine whether they are. And I would hope that could happen before this season, so we more quickly get towards a compatible situation.
Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks for that thorough analysis. Let me just say this. The application that was withdrawn in November. There had been a September deadline for compliance. That wasn't met. And then 2 months later, there was a withdrawal. And now here it is. Virtually, the season is around the corner. And this situation that you have is Ian hit every single issue. So I'm not going to go over all of it again. But let me characterize it as I see it. You have a restaurant that's been there forever. Everybody probably remembers Michael's. It was Michael's Church. And it was always, a little restaurant in a residential neighborhood that had no parking, and if you went there at night, you better bring a flashlight because you break your leg trying to go back to your parking if you weren't careful.
Especially if you're-
No. Or had a nice meal and weren't. But the point is that you are imposing on a residential neighborhood to a degree that never happened before. The catering operations, and the reason I stopped you about the two catering companies is you have not just the restaurant catering a party here or there. You are operating two separate and distinct catering operations out of the same restaurant. You're talking about bringing trucks back and forth, which never happened before in a residential neighborhood. I understand that you're working with the highway department on that, but frankly, it's Band-Aids. It's Band-Aids. This is a residential neighborhood. The people who live there have to endure now trucks, especially in the summer, going and coming back and forth to do facilitate a catering operation that never existed before. The idea to me that you would want to treat this in anything less than an expedited fashion, I think is not very neighborly. I would want this matter resolved very quickly. The application that we got is short. It's very deficient. Eric's memo went through all the deficiencies in it. We need to know what you're going to do. We need to know how you're going to ameliorate the situation. We need to know what the impact is going to be on this community of what amounts to a very different business that has been there for the last however many years, 20 years, whatever it is. I understand that, that you want to resolve the issues in front of the Justice Court, and I want you to do that too. But you're going to have to do that at whatever pace the court requires. But what we're going to require is that all these issues that have been raised in Eric's memo, or the planning department's, memo, are addressed. And that means that we need a real application, not a real application, but a much more detailed, comprehensive application. And it really does need to take into account the impact, the significant impact that this change in the restaurant that's gone on since, well, I guess in the last year or so, that's been occurring. Because we can't have it's under, Eric said exactly right. This would never be approved. Never. But it's there, and it's a restaurant, and it worked fine, except for the police, but it worked fine for many years, but now it doesn't. Now it doesn't. And you're in the Justice Court because it doesn't, and you're before us to try to resolve those issues, and they got to be resolved. They got to be resolved quick. So that's my take on it. If anybody else wants to add anything or subtract from anything, go right ahead.
Yeah, and the only thing, I'm not going to go over all the different items that need attention. I think they've been very adequately delineated, especially by Ian and Eric. And I think Sam makes a very, very good point that neither of them made about the fact that this needs to be expedited quickly. I don't know if the applicant is being naive or nefarious in this. And, I'm always very sympathetic towards how difficult it is to run a business. And I always try to act in a certain way that doesn't make the business owner's life any more difficult. But, and I'm sorry to say that in this case, I just have to be very, very negative about this whole application. I mean, there are certain things that you said that the reason why I say, I don't know if you're naive or you're just trying to pull a fast one. When you say things like, there are two different corporations, that, we've never looked at the septic system as though that sort of ameliorates the problem. It doesn't. I mean, that, that to me tells me that these issues are even more deeply seated than they appear on the surface. So there's a lot to be done here. And I'm not sure whether or not, like I said, I'm kind of pessimistic about whether you're going to be able to swim to the surface on this one.
Just to address that, because
Let me address it.
Yeah.
Michael, did you have anything you want to add?
Well, I agree with Ian that use this memo as a guide. I mean, in the second sentence, the nature of the application is not clear from the submitted items. I mean, I honestly do not know what you're asking for. It's just not entirely clear. And as Sam said, it's got to be clear, comprehensive, thorough.
Randy, did you want to add anything? Do you want me to Sharon? Keep doing it. Sharon, did you want to add?
The only thing I want to add is, I just want to reiterate, Sam, what you're saying. I lived in Springs. I used to go to Michael's, and it all ran very smoothly. And I think the neighborhood really appreciated having a nice restaurant to go to instead of driving into town all the time. Springs has very few of those places that open year round. And unfortunately, this has just turned into a bit of a zoo. And it's unfortunate for the neighbors. So I think they just have to really just think about being good neighbors and get back to a restaurant that's appreciated. And I think the neighbors do appreciate having something to go to that they can walk to and use. But the catering, I think, is just throwing it over the top. And we'll throw it to Ann Glennon, but I think that's going to be a real sticking point in the end. That's it.
Again, you're hearing loud and clear what the board's position is. If you want to say anything else, you're welcome to, but I can tell you right now that whenever the practice, and I know you're not ordinarily before us, practice is for you to get a letter from us identifying the issues that we raise and requiring a resubmission or whatever the particular circumstance requires. But it's going to be 30 days. It's not going to be drag this thing out. It's going to be 30 days. And I'm going to, like Eric said and Ian said, use that memo, the planning department's memo, as a guideline for what at least we're looking for. So then we can really talk.
Sure.
Go ahead.
A couple things I just want to, the technical memo I think I just got on Thursday or Friday last week. So to be able to address everything highlighted in the technical memo by today was just nearly impossible. I do want to highlight something. This is absolutely important. The original application that was submitted, that was then withdrawn, intended to have and store these trailers on site. That is no longer the case. So with respect to Mr. Shantz, he addressed that, the fact that it's not on the site plan. It's not on the site plan because we have no more intention to use it as
You're
such.
still trucking things back and forth, right?
Correct. So, correct. But, one of the key points that I believe Mr. Shantz and Ian also highlighted was the storage of the trailers. Mm-hmm. And that was the problem under the original application. Throughout our conversations, over the last 9 months, 8 months with the town attorney's office and our conferences in the justice court, we made a decision amicably amongst everybody that the trailers being parked there is not an option based upon the size, the code, various reasons. Just determined that wasn't an option. So we wanted to make it clear on this application that there's no intention or no request here to create an area where we would park the trailers on site. So as of August of 2021, the trailers were stored off-site. So what happens is, just to get so the board can understand and everybody can understand, the trucks that are used are everyday trucks. They're not commercially, they're not special trucks. They're your everyday pickup truck. And they pull a roughly 15-foot enclosed trailer. Those trucks are not actually owned by the operators. They're owned by the employees who do the work, and then they pick up the trailer. And then they bring it to Rita, they load and then bring it off site. So I just want to make it clear that the trailers are not being stored there. We're not attempting or seeking to store the trailers there.
But your operation is going to be bringing trucks back and forth. Right?
Correct.
So anybody who lives in the neighborhood, they're not going to say, oh, well, that truck isn't owned by the restaurant, it's okay. Right? I mean, what you have to consider is the impact on the community of the operation that you're talking about.
Sure.
Now, I understand very well the legal niceties and the distinctions among ownership of of a truck by an LLC or by the individual or by the restaurant in which it operates or by the owner of the real property on which the restaurant is located. I understand all this. That's not an issue. The issue for the planning board is, what is the impact of this on the community?
I understand. What I wanted to do is the reason why I was explaining that, not because I'm trying to create an argument as to why, or it's not my point. My point is the information, right? What's important, and you know, Mr. Cortese brought it up. I don't want the board to believe in any way, shape, or form that my client, or the property owner is being nefarious in any way. I mean, that's not why we're here. Well, we're here because we want to provide the information and see, you know, like Ian said, if there's a solution that we can come up with. You know, we've been working, I understand the time.
Let me give you a guidepost. It's not from Mr. Cortese, but from Sharon. Be a good neighbor. Okay? I think Sharon, he said it, right? Be a good neighbor. All right? This has not, till now, been being a good neighbor. And this is what is needed. Okay? And that means that you have to deal with these trucks and this catering operation. And whether it's one single catering operation or 4 different LLCs or 2 different LLCs or whatever it's doing the catering operation, or if it's the individual driver owners doing the operation. That's why before when I asked you the question, I asked you about, you know, well, one entity injures you, is the other entity liable? Well, yeah, okay, fine. If you were in a litigation involving some kind of commercial or bodily injury liability, you sure would identify the separate entities. I know, you know, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the impact on the community. Okay? The impact on the community of these trucks coming and going is significant and can't be dismissed. It has to be addressed.
Sir, and if I implied at all tonight that we were dismissive
No,
the trucks and trailers,
I don't mean to.
I apologize.
I don't mean to put that around your neck.
That
was my word.
Okay.
But I want to be clear about that. But what I am saying to you is that, you know, you have, regardless of corporate identity, okay, you've got an impact on the community that this business is creating. Okay. So I don't need to, I'm not saying you dismiss it. I'm not. I'm saying that you have to appreciate our product.
Absolutely. 100%. You know, and this is my first time before this board. But thank you. But I mean, you know, obviously the good thing is that because we were last, I was able to hear everything else today.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And it helped me understand what the board is concerned with, and you know, what we need to address. And we understand that this is a difficult situation as far as, you know, how it's being observed by those in the community. I will reiterate to my clients, you know, who are all waiting for me to call when I get done here, right? I don't know. I will reiterate to them, you know, being a good neighbor is the most important thing. All right, moving forward and what we're looking to do.
And also to reiterate something else that Mr. Cortese said, we're not anti-business, you know. I mean, people come here and they have business ideas, and you know, we address those from a planning perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And in this and planning, that planning perspective rings different bells. You know, sometimes the water is an issue, and you do have an issue regarding potential. And sometimes traffic is an issue, which, you know, is here. And sometimes character of the community is an issue. You know, there's a whole list. If you look at the EAF, that gives you a good idea what, you know, where these things fall out. So the answer is, you've got a lot of work to do and not a lot of time to do it. And I'm not saying you can't do it. Believe me, I know that when people have to do things, they do things. You have to do things. Got it?
We understand.
Can I?
And I will, like I said, I will convey to my clients that you got to be good neighbors, understanding the expedience by which we have to do this. And I just want to say, we're coming here hat in hand.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why we're here. We're here hat in hand to try to come up with a resolution So again, I don't want my words or, the way I presented the narrative to come off as if we are intending to damage the community or just do whatever we want to do. I mean, that's why we're here, and that's why we've had such extensive conversations in the town court with Judge Rana and Mr. McMaster regarding this matter, because we understand the impact it has on the community.
Well, it's different lanes, different.
For sure. Understood.
Ian, was that you?
Yeah, just to follow up and maybe wrap this up, unless anybody else has something. But I fully understand the applicant wouldn't have enough time, between the time this memo came out and today, to resolve all of these issues. But as Sam has said, and we've all said, you're going to have a very busy 30 days because we do want them resolved by then. And also, to be clear, I think the applicant has come here, seems like a nice person. I don't know the owners well. What I do know is not negative. So I think it's important to presume the best in people when you can, but this is really like a trust but verify type of situation. I'm not going to assume any ill will here, but we need all of the details in place that are going to ensure that the site is used in a compatible and appropriate way. And ultimately, that's how I think this is going to be determined. But just since I'm asking for specificity about what is going to be at that site, and I've sort of laid that out in my first, I want to go back to a few things. You said the trucks won't be parked there and the trailers won't be parked there. We still have to demonstrate that access, and parking when they're loading up works. So that's got to be part of the site plan that we get within the next 30 days. Any deliveries coming in and going, we have to know that the site is going to function and work for all of your uses. Even if catering is allowed to be an accessory use to a restaurant, it has to function at a specific site. If you have a restaurant that's the whole building takes up the whole space and you have to park in the middle of the road, that might not work. So I want you to consider those things. One thing I meant to say earlier and I didn't is also the dumpster. I think that the dumpster should not be in the right of way on the residential side of the neighborhood. And I say that because I don't want you to design the site plan with all the specificity we're asking for, not move that and have me bring it up the next time. So I think that should be in a more concealed location. And maybe there's room, maybe there's not, but I just wanted to make sure that I laid those out there so that you have all the information I think you need to get us what we need within the next 30 days.
I guess that's a good point about the dumpster. And what that really goes to is, with this particular application, in all things, it should be viewed through the prism of we're in the middle of a residential neighborhood.
Understood.
And that's where it comes from. So again, everything is in good faith, and we appreciate you coming in here and dealing with us in good faith, and we look forward to seeing you here. Thanks very much.
And so,
we had a letter from us.
Oh, we're gonna
lay out some issues, but you've heard plenty from us.
As far as the date is concerned, though,
I don't know what they are.
Okay, so it'll be in the letter.
What the letter will say is, Jody, is going to say something along the lines of, your next application or your updated application, whatever the precise words are, will be due in 30 days. If not, it will be deemed abandoned.
Understood.
All right.
Okay.
We literally bullet point the outstanding items that are required to get a complete application. So you'll have a list of items that are required.
That's a good point. You'll give as useful a letter as the applicant can get. And that'll be in a couple of days.
And Eric, you're moving forward. You're going to be the planner assigned to this, or is it going to be Marco?
No, it'll be me for the first.
I think because when we initially applied it, I think I was told that Marco was going to handle it. Okay.
Yeah, Marco had the previous application, but I'm handling it from this point forward.
Understood. Thank you.
And also, you should know that Ed Krug, who is not with us right now, is the planning board member with responsibility for this application.
Okay.
But as you can see, we all look at everything. And we do. We all read everything that comes in front of us or submitted to the board. Okay?
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure meeting everybody. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye. Okay. All right, we are done with our work session, and we covered the one matter that we had on for regular meeting. We have one modification to have it. Okay. Lou?
In the matter of the application of Roy Tuxillo site plan special permit, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-50-1-25.1. I have read the resolution amending approval, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? Passed 6-0. Okay, we have no meeting next week. So,
I'm sorry, can I just interject? Did you guys do the Megron Realty resolution? I just missed it.
from the very beginning, and it passed.
All right, I missed it, sorry.
Yeah, Jody, you have that? Jody?
I read it.
Yeah, I know you read it.
Yes, I have it.
You got it, okay. Very good. Okay, like I said, no meeting next week. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Sharon? Ian?
No.
All right, somebody make a motion.
It's just nice to see everybody argue in person again.
LTV, I should continue to thank LTV for being a hybrid tonight. And staff, planning staff, thank you very much. Also for being
I
hybrid.
want to add that it took me a year to get my nameplate, and Michael got it in a matter of weeks.
Likewise, yeah, and mine even says chairman, and it took me a year, so. Nancy, thank you very much. And everybody, thank you.
I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any opposed? Pass 6-0. We're adjourned.